9:46. Oh, hey, I got a microphone now. Okay, they got it working now. Wait a minute, it was working. Now you got it. It's loud too. Yes, I got a few minutes. Right. Ah. Doing good. All right, I've got 9:30. So we'll get started. We're at 1 Timothy chapter 3. We had just about finished up with verse 3. I think we covered everything in verse 3. That's a lot of the knots. Oh, hey, did I lose my sound? You playing with it? Okay. You want me to keep talking so you can hear it just right? Okay, that's good. All right. So there was several knots in that verse. Not given to wine, not violent, not greedy, not quarrelsome, not covetous. I don't know if did we talk about the free from love of money, not covetous? I can't remember if we talked on that last part. How do you tell if somebody is a lover of money or covetous? Somebody else. Now, it's a little easier to look at yourself and sometimes recognize things like this in yourself and realize, hey, I don't need to be doing this because my motivation's not right, my heart's not right. But when it's somebody else, it's a little difficult to know what's in their heart. Now, if they say, man, I just love making money. I just love money. I'm really glad I'm making a lot of money. I'm really glad I'm making a lot of money. This really satisfies me. Well, that would be a good hint. So it's a thing. You may suspect it. And sometimes you may think, well, you can kind of piece together a lot of comments somebody might make, like they'll make decisions based on their money above church. Well, I can't help in the church because I've got this big deal I'm going to make. I'm going to make a lot of money, and it's a continual thing. People have to make money for a living. So on that side of it, well, you've got to have somebody who is supporting themselves and is making money so that they can do good for others. But on the other side, you don't want somebody who's who is a lover of money. We can't have that. So somewhere in the middle, we got to have some reasonableness for what we can see. And like I said before, a lot of this is for self-examination for the people who are considering becoming an elder. If I am considering becoming an elder and I'm looking through these, it might motivate me to realign my priorities a little bit, to think, I'm too motivated by money. Maybe I need to rethink that for a while, because I want to be an elder and serve in the church. And if this is going to interfere, I might need to let some of these things take a back seat in my life, because they're overwhelming my decisions on things. Anybody else have an idea how we can approach that? Yes, Steve.
Is there a scripture now, as an elder, of course you're a shepherd, to oversee the flock? You're required by scripture to be apt to teach, and so you attempt to teach on all the verses. But is there a scripture that tells me that I have to be the person that determines if someone else is in love with money? Yes, we have to teach the scriptures about money. Give according to your means. You can tell the tree by its fruits. Where your treasure is, there your heart is also. So there are a variety of scriptures that teaches me biblical principles that I need to apply to myself.
Right.
But I don't think that I know the scripture that tells me it's my requirement, or even an elder's requirement, to make that judgment apart from just teaching the biblical principles for me to then apply to myself.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. So he's talking about these are things to teach, to apply to ourselves. A little more difficult to apply to others. There's not always a black and white test. Yes, sir.
I like what you said earlier about the ideas of things. They eventually, I guess what I'm thinking is they eventually come out.
Yeah.
Time as we watch and observe people, especially when we're looking at qualifications of elders or deacons or members of the church even. But in particular here as elders, over time, as we observe people, those things come out. And
Yeah.
You see that.
Yeah.
Eventually you see whether or not they're focused more on earthly riches and,
Yes.
and making a pile of money or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Versus, being committed to Christ and His church.
Yes.
Where's
Yeah.
the priority at?
Yeah. That can surface through a combination of things. Yes, ma'am.
I think another thing that you can look at is the way they do business. The
Yeah.
way they run their business. Are they doing things that maximize the profit, but yet hurt others?
Yeah. Hurting others must not be right in any situation, but yeah, are they fair in their business dealings with other people? That they sell you a used car, or are they trying to hoodwink you when they're trying to sell it? Now, a lot of people have sold used cars and sold their own cars, but we try to tell them what's good about it. We try to tell them what's wrong about it. But sometimes there may be something wrong about it you didn't know when you sold it. And that can surface and make you look bad. But you just you got to try to be honest when we're dealing with other people. So, all right, let's go to verse 4. This is an interesting one here. One who rules his own house well, having his children in submission with all reverence. And then this verse 5 kind of gives a reason for that one. For if a man does not know how to rule his own house, how will he take care of the church of God? Now, if you read that New American Standard 20 edition, one who manages his own household well, keeping his children under control with all dignity. That one we can look at a man and how he rules or manages his family, and you can you can get a pretty good impression of what kind of a man he might be. However, everybody who has been a parent has had things with their children that you think, oh my, this is not what I intended for that child to do. This is not going in the right direction at all. And it can be a struggle, and you can question your own self, like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Even when they're babies, sometimes you don't know what you're doing sometimes. I've often said, children can, when they're babies, they sleep a lot right at first, which is good, but they get to be, when they get to toddling and running around, they're a lot of work. There's a lot of effort and just energy, and it's a good thing people are young when they have their kids, because as a grandparent, I wear out a whole lot quicker than I do back when I was a parent. It's fun, but it's a good thing I can say, it's time for y'all to go home, or time for me to go home sometime. I remember my daddy would often say he loves seeing the grandkids in the driveway. We said, why in the driveway? He says, that means they're coming or going. And both are good. So they can be a challenge, but then as they get older, it's a different kind of challenge. They start asking, when they get to be, at one age, they start asking the why questions. Why? And I think Tyler's was a little version of that. How come? His was, how come? How come? And he didn't have the whys, he had the how comes. And another one was, what for? What for? What for? And, you run out of reasons for the how comes and the what fors and the whys. But then they really get to be a challenge sometimes when they get to be teenagers, don't they? Yeah. When they get to be teenagers, they can be very stressful because you're trying to guide them in the right way, and they need to be independent. Their independence and this strife they have with their parents for independence is a step of growth in the right direction, because you don't want dependence your whole life with a child. You want them to be out there on their own, able to make good decisions. But sometimes the best teacher, sometimes what is it, is experience. You get experience from bad decisions. That kind of teaches you some things, and it's hard to let them make mistakes. That is hard, because we want to cover for them. Sometimes we want, a lot of times parents struggle with wanting everything physically and not being faced with difficulties. But what happens to a child that grows up having everything and never having faced difficulties, and they get on there on their own? Well, that's a place for disaster, isn't it? Because they've never been able to handle anything. So you kind of got to start taking, those little steps and get them independent. So you do all this, you do the best you can, and try to teach them scriptures, try to raise them up in the Lord the best you can. But sometimes that doesn't work, does it? Sometimes for a while, and they may make a lot of bad decisions. And a lot of times, parents will kick themselves. If I had realized, some of the tendencies that I saw early were going to be problems later, I might have hedged those off a little bit better than I did. Now I'm proud of them, and for the most part, things are turned out. There you go. Yes. They'll come and experience or a time period or even some years or multiple bad decisions in their lives, you at least can know they've got a foundation that I hope they can come back to. And by my consistent love and letting them know I don't approve of their bad conduct, but I love them, that they'll come back to that. Now, I didn't mean this to turn into a class on parenting. We're talking about elders and their qualifications, one that rules or manages his own household well. But I think it is appropriate to talk about this. Some will, Proverbs 22:6 is a verse that's sometimes I think not used totally in the right manner, which is train up a child in the way he will go. When he's old, he will not depart from it. If you look through Proverbs, you see a lot of rules. Now, I mean, like a rule of thumb. Now, y'all are engineer types, know, and I can't remember if it's left hand or right hand. I get the rule mixed up. But is the energy is traveling one direction, the field around that electricity is traveling the direction of the fingers, and that's a rule with electricity, because I say it just generally always works that way. And there's a lot in Proverbs of things that just generally work that way. They tell you there's a lot in Proverbs that's really good sound advice, and if you heed to that sound advice, things generally work out that way. Ecclesiastes is more of a book but sometimes they don't work out that way. And it kind of goes into a lot of the difficulties we see in life. Even though somebody's tried to do what was right, they see all this bad stuff happening around them. And good doesn't always come out ahead in a lot of situations, because it's kind of a verse that teaches us a book that teaches us how to handle things when things don't work out like we want. But those are a lot of rules in Proverbs, but not laws. A law is something that always happens that way. Laws happen all the time, no matter what. We can't violate a law. The law of gravity is going to be there no matter what you do. But a rule is something that's it generally works out that way. And I think we got to be careful when we're telling people, train up your children when they're young, and when they're old, they'll not depart from it. And if your children never depart, well, it's your fault because you didn't train them upright. Well, that doesn't mean you didn't train them upright, because they have free, independent decision making on their own. And if all it was continually, if parents raise them right, they're always going to be right, then there would, it would be a pattern that couldn't be broken. But the people can make wrong decisions. We've all done it. We've all made wrong decisions about things, in spite of the fact that we knew better. And sometimes those decisions have a lot of hard consequences. So I'm thinking about elders here again. We can kind of see how a fella who we're considering for an elder rules or manages his household. But what about when those children are out of the household? How does that affect our decision when we're selecting an elder? I'm kind of, maybe not on that. In that, if a fellow raises his children and all of his children end up leaving the church, being rebellious, you may have a problem. If an elder has a child that leaves the church, but then they come back, well, I don't think that's a problem. If they are under control and respectful, what was the other word here it talked about? Let's see. What was the word? Under subjection when they're at home, then I think, okay, he's ruling his own house well. But after they're out of the household and they're out on their own,
bad decisions or misbehavior of the child, I don't know that that necessarily disqualifies someone from being an elder, in that it might and it might not. If that child's in leaving the home is doing things that may really harm this elder in serving in his capacity as an elder, then yeah, I think that he might not need to serve. But I can also see a lot of situations where they're out on their own, they're living in, maybe even in another city, or they were faithful for a while and now they've drifted away. That in and of itself may not disqualify a person. Again, here looking at elders, you're looking at a combination of a lot of these different factors for an elder. Does anybody else have a different thought on that about grown? Yes, sir.
Well, this is actually probably something that's above my pay grade to be discussing this, but we are studying and study all of verses here, and I just will say that this is a common question that I've heard studied with wives, lifetime men, my whole life, and common belief is by the majority of wise men that I trust that this is discussing specifically his ability to rule his house. When his children leave there and through life make decisions outside of there, it has no bearing on the quality level of his raising, running his house. And it does not have a bearing on their qualification to be an elder.
Yeah.
Because he did exactly what the scripture said.
Yes.
He ruled his house well.
Yes. Right.
Not unruly while they were there. And so that's all he can control, could have control.
Right. Okay. Yes, sir.
I think it's also important to note that an elder must have children,
Yes.
because then at the beginning, you learn so many things that otherwise you wouldn't learn.
Yes.
Which would help the elder in that position.
Yes. Right.
Nothing teaches you like that.
That's right. So she pointed out that this does indicate to us that, yes, an elder does need to have children. Because, as having children, you learn sometimes how to solve a problem when you don't really know who did it, but you know there's a difficulty and you can get peace back in line. He touched me. He's looking at me. He's still looking at me. Those kind of things. Y'all can remember those happening. He touched me. That's the little ones. I had a couple of them that they would bite like cat and dogs for fun, even when they were teenagers, just because they like to disagree with each other sometimes. And sometimes the best thing to do is just let them go, let them have at it, and they're going to make up and be best friends after a while. And it worked that way too. That also brings up the word children. Now, this is the thing where some people will look at this verse and say he needs to have more than one to have plural children. Others will look at it and say, well, this is a general way to talk about multiple people with children. How else do you say children of all of them without using the plural word for children? So some will say, well, if you have multiple children, then you're having to solve, more of those conflicts between them. Well, that may be true, but then, he could have said must have more than one child. It didn't really say it in that way. He just used the plural for all of them. So that's not the kind of thing I think would knock somebody out, having only one. I think having multiple may have some advantages. I can remember and I've said this to other people or so, you have one child, you go, you've got one, or you pass it back and forth. You pass the child back and forth. Then when you have two, you go man to man. I've got one of them when we go somewhere, you got one of them. Both of you have control of one of them at a time. When you have three, you have to go to a zone defense. I've got this side of the house, you've got that side of the house. It's kind of what happens. But there are some advantages in managing multiple children, but I'm not seeing myself that this is saying an elder can only have must have more than one child, because I think it's a plural sense to apply to all the elders at once is the way the word's used. Yes, sir. Yeah. Okay, so he's saying the 18 or 21, as if I'm paraphrasing right, is really not just a drop dead date, that suddenly they turn 18 or they turn 21 and they're on their own and you don't have responsibility, or it doesn't reflect on the parent anymore. Am I saying that right? So, and you talk in the, and he brought out that in the biblical times, often children into adulthood would work with the fathers in the business activity, carpentry, sheep herding, whatever it may be. And there was a lot there involved in the household, maybe for years beyond 18, 21. And we all know that after a child's 18 or 21, they often come back sometimes from time to time, and they need some extra guidance and help sometimes for years beyond that, to an extent. Yes, sir?
He's absolutely correct. Age has zero to do with the instruction. We know that Abraham went and selected for a wife for his son when he was 35.
Yeah, try that nowadays.
So the instruction is not pick an age and after that age. The instruction is, if you're in my house, this is the rule of my house, and that's why it applies to ruling the Lord's house.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter if he's 35 or decides to live there till he's 50.
Yeah.
This is my house, and
Yes.
this is my rule.
Okay.
Being an elder, you are shepherding the flock, right?
Yes.
Okay. If you've got two children, you're gonna bust the bottom, okay? Congregation sometimes busses it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, an elder, if they've got a family, more than one child, you've got three really, because you got your wife.
Well, or she has three, really. It depended on the situation, yeah.
But you as a head of a household have got to control
Yes.
the Lord's way
Right.
and how to deal with that. You've already got some education in it, some know-how.
Yeah. And you demonstrate, by being the leader in the home, you're demonstrating that leadership ability.
If you do that well, then you think you are, you can do shepherding of the flock well.
Yes. Yeah.
And you don't mind telling your kids to go in the corner, and you shouldn't mind telling your flock, go in the corner.
Yes. Sometimes you have to be stern.
So, I mean, and if you can't do that at home, it's gonna be hard to do that
That's right.
as an elder.
That's true. Now, but I will say this, a lot of times we're looking at elders and our children. All of us need to keep in mind that a lot of times elders' children and preachers' children too, I'll say that, my dad's a preacher, in a way the children live under a microscope of the congregation looking at them. In that you step out of line, everybody reminds you, you're the preacher's kid. You're the elder's kid. So it's like, okay, I know it. Okay, I need to behave. You know, they're watching those elders' children at a different level. But sometimes people will use it for an excuse for bad decisions. And in that, you know, I can see situations where, well, the elders' kids are not going to this youth event. Why do I have to go? Well, that's a false argument. One, whether you should go to something or not is not really related to whether the elders' kids go or not. I mean, it's a, what does he call it? A straw man argument, making an argument about something that doesn't really relate to whether or not it's the right decision or not. But a lot of times we'll look at that and we'll try to hold them to a higher standard, and also use it as a way. Sometimes people use it as a way to justify doing things that are wrong themselves because they've seen elders or preachers' kids do things that were not right, and try to use that to say, well, I can go to this event because so and so as an elder's kid went to that dance, so I can go to that dance, or I saw them drinking just one beer, so I can drink just one beer, and they'll try to use that as a way to justify them not doing something wrong because somebody else did something wrong. Now, obviously, elders' kids and preachers' kids don't need to do anything wrong because you do have to remember, yeah, people are looking at you, and you have an influence over what other people might decide. That there's that factor. But also, when they make wrong decisions, it doesn't justify somebody else making a wrong decision. So, I just thought I'd throw that in there since I grew up under the microscope. It's probably sometimes it was a good thing I did have a microscope looking at me because it probably kept me, I'll say it encouraged me not to do some things that I might have otherwise chosen to do because I had to think about, well, this will get back and this will be a problem. I think my dad sent me a text disagreeing with me right now. All right, let's go to verse 6. Oh, I've got to get this screen back up where it was. Not a novice, lest being puffed up with pride, he fall into the same condemnation as the devil. All right, this is another one of the nots. You know, some of these are positive comments, some of them are negative comments. Not a novice. Or as it says in the New American Standard 20, not a new convert. So he will not become conceited and fall into the condemnation incurred by the devil. So you don't want a new convert or what they call a novice taking that leadership role in the congregation. They just haven't been there long enough to develop that background and leadership skill that they're going to need. And one of the reasons that they can make bad decisions, but also for their own self, if they get into there, they could become conceited, thinking, I'm something else. Look at here, I've been a Christian for 3 years, and I've already stepped up to where I'm going to be considered as an elder. I must be doing something better than everybody else. And the next thing you know, they're thinking real highly of themselves, higher than what they should. And that can cause problems for them in their decision making later on. Now, how new of a novice do they have to not be? Did I say that where it makes sense? How long should they be a Christian before they're not considered a novice? And we don't know. We have to use some good judgment on some things, and it might it might be somewhat longer for different people. Some people can come out of denominations with a load of Bible knowledge, really know the Bible really good because they were deep into denominationalism for a long time and learned a lot about the Bible, and then became a Christian. But we got to be careful because sometimes some of that background may stick with them. I'm going to get to you in a second. May stick with them and create problems in their decision making. So obviously some experience is helpful for an elder. Yes, sir.
I feel that they're always novice.
In a way, we're always growing.
Constantly learning. You're constantly
True.
learning the word. You're constantly understanding
Okay.
the word. You're constantly being technically always.
Always a novice. But we can't say everybody's a novice because then nobody can be an elder. So at some point in the way the word's used, we're talking more new convert kind of novice as opposed to an ongoing, growing Christian later on, in that we're learning more then. But that's a good point. Yes, sir.
What Thomas is referring to is not really novice. Yes, we're all learning. As a matter of fact, you're required to continue to learn and grow. John chapter 15. When we stop doing that and we're not bearing fruit according to Jesus, guess what? Gather together and cast the fire and burn. We are required to continue to grow. The term novice, the use of that is kind of like a modern term would be a rookie. Somebody
Yes.
experience, somebody not able to rightly divide the word of truth, somebody who might be more susceptible to Satan's attack to doing what Peter said many do with false teaching, twist it to their own destruction.
Right.
For a group of people here to say, we want this person to be over us, those people have to be convinced that this person has shown through examples of teaching, because it says an elder has to be apt to teach, so they have listened to him teach, listened to the person teach, experienced it, are convinced that yes, this is somebody who is above us, not a novice, somebody who can help us grow in the truth, and we want to establish this person above us so much that we're going to agree to do what the scripture says and do what that person says. That's the big step.
Yeah.
And so many churches, not least in I've been married 33 years, twice we have been in congregations for years where they installed elders that they shouldn't have. In a very short period of time, the church was split, and we had to leave those churches and go someplace else and find a biblical congregation.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a tricky, it's a hard thing. It's a very,
Yes.
very hard thing. But it's important. And
Yes.
as serious as it is, that's what we gotta do.
Right. Okay. Because we don't want someone inexperienced in the leadership position of the eldership. That's what we've got to keep in mind. Let's do verse 7, and we're going to get through elders today. Moreover, he must have a good testimony of those who are outside, lest he fall into reproach and snare the devil. And in the New American Standard 20, he must have a good reputation with those outside the church, so that he will not fall into disgrace in the snare of the devil. All right, a good testimony or a good reputation is important. You don't want somebody that when you set them up as an elder and it looks bad for the church because of things that have gone on with this person in the general community outside. Now, obviously, character is more important than reputation. Character is who somebody really is. Reputation is who people think they are. But this is saying reputation. Obviously, from the combination of all these verses, we can see that character is very important. But reputation is important too, in that we don't want to hurt the church with this decision. Now, people outside the church, they can make false accusations. This kind of reminds me of the blameless, the very first qualification we talked about a little bit. But they're not going to stick if they don't have anything to stick to, the false accusations and things. I think we've got to consider, when they've done things that are wrong in the past, and maybe they have been forgiven of that, they've made restitution for what it was that was done wrong, but still it's a good idea to set them up as an elder in the church. I'm just trying to think of a good example. Let's say somebody worked at the bank and he was an embezzler at the bank. He was an embezzler when he was 23, 24 years old. He got caught, he went to prison, he came out of became a Christian, came out of prison, started over, and has done really good things in his life, and has really rebuilt himself and become a good Christian. Is his character, is his reputation in the community going to be a problem later on? It could be. It could be something that we need to, even though he may have really good qualifications, a lot of these things, these consequences of his past sin may still linger and still be a problem. And we've got to consider that. We don't want somebody that's going to be in the leadership role of the church that's going to hurt the church because of the things they've done. We're not looking for perfect people. There's that too. But it is something to consider how they look from the outside as to what we're doing. Yes, sir?
Well, and I will use myself here as the example of someone who has not necessarily done something wrong, but still may not be qualified as an elder. Twice, I'm married and had a female divorce me to take my child. Second time I took my son back to court and was a single parent for 5 years. Lisa, and I feel that the church has thought I'm scriptural divorce, but Lisa's my third wife. I've been asked if I would consider being an elder, and I said no, because how will it look for someone sitting there who's been divorced twice, married to his third wife, talking to a young couple about you need to fight through this and not get a divorce? It's just not workable. So for my respect for the office, I will not accept that position. Not that I've done something wrong, but for the high price
Yeah.
of holding that office up.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good point. All right. Anybody else have a comment here while we're talking about the reputation from those outside, or was that the first bell? Okay, so we got time for a question real quick. If anybody else has got one before they ring the second bell.
Well, I have a question kind of off topic a little bit, but if someone did something wrong and they became a Christian and corrected themselves, wouldn't that put them as a higher standard to become?
They're absolutely forgiven. But what we're talking about is the apostles' instruction is consider the reputation of those without. Even though those without may have the wrong idea about this person, we've got to consider that as a factor. Yes, someone who has done sin in the past and has been forgiven can often be very effective in teaching and bringing others to Christ because they've dealt with some of these problems that other people sometimes don't have to deal with. They've had bad things in their past, and through the love of Christ and the support of their brethren, they've overcome them, they've been forgiven, and now they're on the right path. That's a person that can really reach out to other people, sometimes better than those that have not. However, I would still say, we got to go by the apostles' guidance of having the proper reputation from those that without, even in those kind of situations. All right, next week we get to talk about deacons. We'll start there.